Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I am your host, Niti, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here on North Carolina. If you missed past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. We are people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel, and we are shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you. We are sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Be kind and self-govern. If you have questions, please put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air with Greg Clarkson, regenerative farmer and ASN on Kansas. And now I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Oh, whoops.
Oh,
sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Welcome, you guys. How are you doing? How are you doing, Anna? How are you doing, Greg?
Good. Yeah. The snow's all melted here. How about you, Anna? You still got snow?
We have a slight coating of ice mostly.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's not good.
We might tonight.
We have like 70 degrees over here, and it's crazy.
I don't want to hear it.
So you're having spring, huh?
I mean, we had frost and snow. Like snow, we never have that much snow. And then now it's our poor weather out there doesn't know what's going on. It's like ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. Well, it's been a very strange year in Alaska. We've had many ice storms. And then we've had a long period of the equivalent of drought with no precipitation at all.
Wow.
So it's been very strange here too.
Huh.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to empty out those pockets as much as they can.
Well, the jet stream is going all over creation. It's, operating in ways that it's never operated before. We know that it can be manipulated,
right,
and steered, but it may just be, that they're having problems because the North Pole has migrated.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Moving fast. It's moving fast right now.
Yeah. And that creates, all sorts of disturbances. The magnetic force.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an extreme jet stream coming in tonight where it's coming down with a really sharp angle, cutting all the way down to the Gulf. And so there will be tornadoes in those Gulf states, I believe, tonight, the way that's cutting down through there. So, it may, like you said, it may very well be that the pole shift that's occurring, or, the migration, I should say, that's occurring right now.
Right. And the thing that we forget is that magnetism is billions of times stronger than electricity.
Yep.
Yes.
So when you have a major pole shift, and the location of the North Pole is going south and with respect to us, east, right? It's changing the dynamic of the weather and the weather patterns. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with quote unquote climate change or carbon dioxide or anything like that. It's going to create these kinds of changes and havoc anyway, just simply because the pole is shifting.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to continue our conversation with you, Anna, about the aggressive assembly creation, because Gregory's working on Kansas. So I believe you had a couple of questions for Anna.
Yeah, I've just been working a lot with our coordinator here, and one of the topics that we've been talking about a lot is the banking, with how close we're getting with the banking, and the distinction between the prosperity accounts for for the men and the women, and then the accounts for the state, and also the county at the county level. So It's really grassroots here. We got a lot of work to do on Kansas, but we've been having some great conversations. And I think one of the discussions was uh, if that's this whole state versus county. And we've had this discussion before. We really need to begin with the state, kind of top down instead of bottom up approach.
Right,
Uh,
because of the way everything
yeah,
was done.
yeah, because of really the logic of where we are. But then there's this whole thing about, okay, so but how do we prepare? Because Kansas has, I believe, it's 103 counties. So how do we prepare uh, ourselves for moving down to the county level? Obviously, we're a long ways away from that, and some of the counties in Kansas may have only 1,000 people in them. There's really, really sparsely populated counties here.
Right. Well, um, I'd say that's similar to most states. Um, the the way that this works is that the land and soil exist in a perpetual union.
Mhm.
So if you think about it, the soil is defined as the first 6 inches of the land. And if you pare off that 6 inches, what happens? Well, then there's another 6 inches immediately below that. I
Right.
mean, there's really no way that you can separate the soil from the land. It's like it's integral. And so that is the only perpetual union that exists, is the perpetual union between the land and the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of nature that it's that way. So when you walk through the door and you populate Kansas, each person that joins the assembly is also at the same moment populating their county.
Right.
So it's a process that is integral. It's happening at the same time, right? And it's organic, just as we are. So that as you gain more members at the state level, you're also gaining more members at the county level.
Okay.
And as you build up the county level, you're building up the union state. Okay, so the union state and the state of the union are fused. Okay, and they occupy two separate jurisdictions, but they still occupy those jurisdictions together. They're inseparable. So the union state and the state of the union are merged. They're together forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so the county assembly can be as few as 2 people. We're not into a numbers game here. Think of it in terms of inheritance. If there's a big estate and there's only one heir, he's still an heir.
Right.
If there's a big estate and there are 30 heirs, each one of them is still an heir, right?
Right. Right.
And that's the situation we have here. Whether we have large numbers or small numbers, it doesn't really matter. There's still someone standing as heir to the property.
Yep.
And that jurisdiction. And so that's the important part, is that we have populated our states. And once our states are populated, then that forms a bulwark for our counties to get populated and to come forward and bring forward the national jurisdiction. And it just turned out that that was the way it worked, so that we could protect the counties, and we could step into that position of protecting our states in the
Mm-hmm.
international realm, and give it time to produce the Union state in back of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as the county, I think I've heard you mention this before, the county is the soil jurisdiction and the
Right.
state is the land jurisdiction. You're
Right.
talking, okay, so so that way, if you have these cross county things where mineral rights or an aquifer or something like that that's in the land,
Right.
that becomes a state
That's state issue.
state issue. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now the county is actually the nation state.
Okay.
Okay. That you see it written nation small n hyphen state small s. That's the Union state they're talking about. And that is the national jurisdiction of the soil.
Okay.
And the state of the Union, which we are operating now, is the international jurisdiction. But the way the founders set this up, the state of the Union, our states, our state assemblies, is the only entrance or exit to the national jurisdiction of the counties. There's only one way in and one way out, and we're guarding it. So,
yeah.
and
that's really powerful. Can I ask a question about this?
Yeah.
Since you're talking about this, it's kind of be a little left turn, Anna.
Hmm.
Because of Trump is doing
Trumpykins.
because he's trying to say that he's trying to make a deal with Canada, supposedly, about them helping us, or helping to, not us, but helping to fund him, the British territorial. And then this would be the United States of Canada. Have you heard it? You know what I'm talking about? And he's trying to include, like, he's trying to invite them to be a state, like a nation state within the United States and make Canada a state. Okay. But they're like, no, if we're funding you, then this would be, I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, Mr. Trump is inviting Canada to be the 51st state because Canada is sopping up $100 billion a year, which is more than most states, in federal support. And they are also developing a huge trade deficit with us.
Right.
So they're not helping our economy. They're just siphoning off of us. And that's what he's, that's what he's responding to and what he's taking up with them. They in turn are trying to further restrict our access to their markets, and they're trying to impose higher tariffs on the products that they do produce and ship over here. That's going to result in a trade war. It's called a trade war. They're going to lose. I'm sorry.
But no, because you're talking about the way that our forefathers established the way in and out. I would really love to see you talk about why we can or cannot do whatever he's proposing, just based on what you were just teaching us.
Okay, well, in the first place, it wouldn't be Canada, all of Canada operating as a state. Canada has millions and millions and millions of people, and huge expanse of land and natural resources and everything else. So any kind of accession like that would not happen, making it a 51st state. What would happen is that each one of the provinces would vote on whether they wanted to join the Federation of States. And of course, they're already developed enough at the territorial level so that they could immediately enroll as states. And basically, we would be doing the same sort of thing that we did when we enrolled the Western states.
Hmm.
We would be doing an enrollment of Saskatchewan and an enrollment of Alberta and an enrollment of, each one of the provinces that applied to be a state would then become a state by the same exact um, Northwest Ordinance process.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, they could individually as provinces. They're territorial governments now. That's all they are. That's all they've ever been, is territorial governance, just like we had in the Western states. And they could choose to be part of the United States instead of Canada. And we could enroll them as such.
Mm.
So, but
Would there be different treaties though that were, in their past that are would there be anything in a treaty that would prevent them from moving from a territorial to a nation state?
no,
No. Okay.
there really isn't. But instead of one gigantic 51st state, what you'd have is, however many provinces, I forget, but however many provinces would have the opportunity to become states. And those that didn't want to become states could become nation states in their own right, or they could remain territories of Britain, or France even, They don't have the same structure that we do, which I was just talking about, where there's only one way in and out of international jurisdiction, and that being your state of the union.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, Ontario has a very rich French heritage. And I'm sure that it chafes them to be under the dominion of the British Empire and to be a British territorial entity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe they will want to, emerge from under that British territorial dominance and decide to be a French territory. They could theoretically do that. But in any event, yeah, they could set themselves up. They could be, they could have an initiative, a plebiscite. And for example, Alberta could choose to be a state of the union.
Mm-hmm.
And there really isn't anything that the current government could do about it. But the people on both sides of the border would have to agree to this and accept it. I mean, they would have to want to be the 51st, 52nd, 53rd, whatever state of the union.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have to take action and contemplate what this meant for us in terms of expanding our responsibilities and the cost and the development expense and everything else involved. And we would have to decide, say yay or nay, to enroll them as states of the union.
Would that extend the gift of the sovereignty that was given to our land?
Yes, if they became part of the United States, yes, it would.
Wow. Okay, that's powerful.
That's huge. That's like a really, I mean, and also this thing that the Trump administration is talking about, is this even, I mean, it sounded laughable to me because I was like, do they not even know who we are? They're just having this conversation. It's such a joke, like, right?
Well, they're having their conversation at their level, and we have our conversation at our level. Okay. I try to explain this to people in terms of a split rail fence. Okay. If you're standing over here on this side and looking in that direction, you've got one view of the landscape beyond, right? Right. But if you're standing on the other side and looking in that direction, it's a completely different view, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is what we have going on here, where we as the employers have a different view than they as employees have.
Mm-hmm.
and we have different concerns.
Mm-hmm.
We have different empowerments.
So you've spoken about Benjamin Fulford before, and he is sharing this information of this possible merger.
Well,
Of
he's a Canadian, so of course he's offended.
exactly. And he's back. So he left Asia and he's back in an effort to, and he's saying he's in negotiations on that level with them. Is that true?
Well, he could be. I haven't talked to Ben in probably a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
But um, okay, he's a Canadian.
Right.
That's his country, right? He has the right fellow feeling for his country.
Sure.
And he doesn't want to see any kind of aggressive legal or some sort of force implied, us leveraging Canadian debt or trade deficits to harm Canadians or harm Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that that's what Mr. Trump is about. I don't think that's what he's bent on. I think what he's bent on is we got to stop spending $100 billion a year on Canada with no return from Canada in terms of trade and opening up its markets to American goods. So he's looking at it in terms of, hey, Americans should be getting back something for that 100 billion, guys. There should be some sort of reciprocity here,
Right.
some sort of evening out of the playing field. And so I think that the remark certainly got attention, but it did not. He doesn't intend to invade Canada. He's not, talking about a forced, um, some sort of a cession of Canada. That's not what he's talking about. What he's talking about is the trade deficit and the fact that so much money is being spent on Canada with no reciprocity back across the border. And in a trade war, they're going to lose. And that's not going to work for them. They may want to do it out of spite, but it's still not going to work for them.
Well, they've got so many protections built in. I mean, if you look at the tariffs that they have on our products and their industries that they're protecting, there's upwards to 200% tariffs there. So,
right. So we'll just be applying the same across the border on them.
There's no way they can win this because they're being protective. We haven't been. We're putting a little bit of protection in, but there's no way they can win. They can't win this battle.
No.
And they should know that. But that's still where maybe at the individual province level, they're certain provinces with their resources are going to be looking at that maybe a little more logical because of that situation.
Well, and look, we're going to be improving our situation here incredibly. And Canada, if it stays in the territorial system they're in now, is just going to be exploited and impoverished and suffer, all sorts of dictatorial crap from the Trudeau government. And, they're going to continue to languish and have problems with their national economy and everything. And so, there's already a movement in Canada to join the United States because they see that what we've got going is very positive, and what they've got going is just more of the same old shit, only worse. And so I think that Trump really stirred up a bee's nest that he didn't have to stir up in quite that way, but he did focus a lot of attention on it by doing that. And I think that many Canadians are kind of looking at things now that they hadn't really thought about, just as we are thinking about things that we haven't really thought about as a result of that, in that, how many of us were aware of the Canadian trade deficit before this?
Mm-mm.
Not it brought it into the public focus. Okay, and it's important. 100 billion a year is 100 billion a year.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And having those kinds of tariffs and trade barriers against our products in Canada, and not having similar tariffs against their products, creates an unfair situation. And that's one of the things that Mr. Trump has been tooting about ever since he got back in office is, hey, look, guys, this isn't fair. We've opened up our markets to all of you, and you haven't opened up your markets to us. So all that does is impoverish us and drain away our resources and our industry for your benefit, and we get nothing in return, and that's not right. There's no quid pro quo working here. It's all take and no give.
Yeah.
And so he's absolutely right about that. And if we're to improve our trade balances with countries like China, we have to improve our trade balances with all these other countries.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's part of a dynamic. It's part of a whole system, a worldwide system in which America has been the prey, the giver for, well, ever since World War II.
Yeah.
And so, now Trump is saying, enough, guys. You've had the advantage of, open access to our borders, open access to our products. We've been giving and giving and giving since World War II, and now it's time for you all to stand up on your own two little feet and to assume a position of parity, and to be thinking in terms of establishing just and reasonable trade operations.
Yeah, and there's the recent announcement from TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They're going to invest $100 billion into 3 semiconductor fabs in Arizona. There's a great example of that. Would have never happened before until what Trump's doing is sort of force their hand, and that's part of that rebalancing to get
Right.
some of the manufacturing back over here on America.
Right, exactly. And so, I think Ben Fulford and a lot of other Canadians have responded with a knee-jerk reaction to, a threat against their nation and their country, and rah, rah, rah. What actually, what they need to be thinking about is what they want.
Yeah.
I hate to keep coming back to this little grandma song and dance and saying, well, think about what you want. What kind of world do you want to live in? Are you thoroughly happy with what you've got? And if not, how does it need to change?
Yeah.
The Canadians are overall not happy with the Trudeau government and haven't been. And so trying to make this look like some sort of act of aggression against the country as a whole helps Trudeau, ironically, marshal the patriotic instincts of the Canadians when he's a globalist.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, they're all the globalists, and your article like plainly states all of this. Like, we've been living in this one world government for all this big long time. It's nothing new, and like everybody can go ahead and just realize what's going on now.
Right.
Catch up. But okay, Anna. So let's get to some questions. If you guys are fine with that.
Well, I did want to kind of finish off.
Yes, go ahead, please.
With the issue of the states being the only way into and out of the counties.
Got it. Yes.
For other world powers.
Yes.
The way that our founders did that, and the reason they did that, was to forestall other countries from coming in here and buying off counties.
Yep.
Oh, you've talked about this before, I remember. Because
Right.
like you were saying, like what if one of your counties gets along better with some other state and they just decide that they're going to go be a part of them or whatever. I remember you talking about this.
Well, think about it. Back at the time of the Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
prior to the Revolution, you had 13 colonies.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But some of them were English colonies, some of them were Dutch colonies, some of them were Catholic, some of them were Protestant, some of them were French,
Right.
some of them had Spanish, uh, antecedents. Uh, all of these different warring European nations across the Atlantic had their claws into those colonies, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so after they won their independence and are in the process of becoming states, declaring them estates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, then how do they keep these European governments from coming in at the county level and picking off county by county and getting the people in these individual counties to go back to their affiliation with the Pope or with the Dutch king or with the British king or the French king? You
Sure.
know, we
Yeah.
could wind up with a hodgepodge of counties in every state having different allegiances to different foreign governments and no way to control any of it ourselves and have an independent country. So what they did is they made the state of the union the only ingress or egress point for the counties into the international jurisdiction. And that's how they prevented these foreign governments from coming in and going to the local county officials and saying, hey, we'll give you $1 billion for your county, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
buying them or cajoling them or whatever it was necessary, but to go in and pick off the counties one by one. And
Yeah.
they were prevented from doing that by making the state the only international doorway, the only portal for the counties to gain access to the international jurisdiction or for the international jurisdiction to gain access to the counties.
So a couple of questions come up for me when you're talking about that. So in the original colonies, when was the counties formed? Were they formed in the original 13 colony while they were colonies, or was that a part of when they became estates?
Mm-hmm.
Well, um, the actual borders and things were being formed at the time of the revolution, where we had the state borders beginning to take shape. And there were still a lot of different altercations. They were still settling state and county borders uh, in the years after the revolution.
Yeah.
But they started looking at themselves as landed estates. And that's where the word state comes from, is from estate.
Yeah.
Okay. And the people that were there were the lords of the manor, so to speak. They were the owners of the estate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the county system comes from the British system that had been in place in England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, right? You've heard of County Clare, Ireland, and so forth. So there was already an established county system that was part of the original British colonial system here in the country prior to the Revolution. That was part of their system for the House of Burgesses.
Oh.
Okay.
Hmm.
So they had delegates from each of these colonies that also came from each one of the counties within those organized colonies.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that was the second question, as you were talking about, the only ingress egress to international is through the state.
State of the
And
Union.
Yeah, and that makes I understand the logic to protect the county level, but then that brings up the question for me: and maybe you just answered this, but at the state level, does each county have a vote, so to speak? So that the reason why I ask that is if one county was trying to be bought by some, come in by some international, by some other country, the other counties could come together and say, oh, no, no, no. At the state level, that can't happen.
Um, it wouldn't happen that way in our system because the State of the Union would block it.
Okay.
Okay, we would shut the door on that proposal right there.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and so but the counties, again, you're looking at an interesting system of checks and balances.
Mm-hmm.
The Union State, which is what's formed by all the counties together, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think of it as a patchwork quilt, and all the counties are pieces in the quilt, and then you have the state that is formed from all those counties.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Union State, and it is what controls the national jurisdiction. That is the actual sovereign entity. That's where our sovereignty is lodged,
Okay.
in that protected enclave of counties.
Okay.
Okay. The State of the Union is not the sovereign entity, but it is in perpetual union with the sovereign entity.
Yeah. Okay.
And therein is part of the rub, because while we can represent the sovereign entity, we are never the sovereign entity. While we protect the sovereign entity, we are still not the sovereign entity.
Right.
And so the sovereignty of the country and of the state is vested in the Union State. And the protection of the Union State and international jurisdiction is vested in the state of the Union.
Mm-hmm.
And you've heard the phrase State of the Union all your life, right?
Right.
So what is the state of the Union? Well, you've got the Union State, and then you've got the state of the Union. The word of implies being separate from or belonging to the state. Okay, so you've got the Union State at the base of the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got the State of the Union. And what we're operating in our assemblies right now is the State of the Union. The State of the Union functions in international jurisdiction. And this is one of the strangest things that people have the hardest time, because, we have our state recorders.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our own land recording office at the state level.
Yep.
But that's actually an international function.
So they're already international recording secretaries.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Well, praise the Lord, because let me just tell you, this has been the biggest confusion and contention. And that just explained a whole bunch of chaos right there.
Okay, so the international recording secretaries and the state recording secretaries are operating in international jurisdiction. And, the only difference is that the state recording system is keeping the records of the State of the Union, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the Federation's international recording secretaries are keeping records at the Federation level, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So we just had a big kerfluffle this last week with one of our international recording secretaries. Got called from some people that were having trouble getting recorded for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to declare, record, and publish. Well, that's their right. That is their absolute right. And nobody should be standing in the way with any technical difficulty or, there shouldn't be any question about that. There should be just boom, boom, boom. You have your declaration, you sign it, you have your witnesses, they sign it. You prove who you are, and you are in.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that we keep these multiple systems is so that one system can't be targeted and stop that process.
Yep.
The redundancies are important.
Yep.
They are. And so,
Mhm.
I've explained to Terry, for example, from the very beginning that
Mhm.
yes, we're going to have an international land recording service and
Mhm.
we're going to have state land recording services. And
Mhm.
and even we will use the state land recording offices to the extent that they exist. We'll use any land recording office to do this, to immortalize and create a public record for the individual so that they can get their status established. This is
Right.
of prime importance.
So
Okay.
our
State
uh
recorders.
well, our land patent office that Greg and I are putting together for the, for people to be able to do their notices and do everything,
Mhm.
we also would be operating as a land recording office. And so you're calling. I just want to ask a question about this, Anna, because we're ready. We're ready right now
Yeah.
we can go live with the notices. We can go live with the LRO part, but um there's just, like we're building the little part for everybody to see, like when they enter in their number, then they'll be able to pull up their records. So at this red hot minute, they can't see it yet. We can see it. They can't see it yet. We're almost where they can do that part. But the notice part, they can see all these other parts of it. Absolutely. 100%. And then the, auto generation, the document generator is the last little bit also that we're fixing. And because you just said we're already international recording secretaries, that means that, and just tell me if this is wrong, like the Kansan or North Carolinian, because of the way that we have the office set up, part of it's in Kansas, part of it's on North Carolina, for the actual offices that for the whole project that we're doing.
Mhm.
Um, um, does that mean that the Kansan or the North Carolinian recording secretaries can record them under the authority of our state? Because it's an international jurisdiction. Because, for example, I'll tell you what's going on. Like, I got people who are coming to us who are like on Texas or wherever, and they're like, we can't record. We can't get our recording secretaries or whomever. They just want to go ahead and get their paperwork done. So we can go ahead and get their paperwork done and then still continue to help them try to connect with their assemblies, right? And for anywhere, just because they just want to hurry up and publish, and then they can get their GFG one done. They can get all these different ones done. They just want to be everywhere because they've heard you say and us say so many times that you should publish everywhere that you can, like as many places as possible.
Well, and that's because of the confusion and the fact that so many land recording offices worldwide have been shut down.
Right.
You know,
So what say ye about that? And then especially for the land patent part of it, this is some clarity I'm seeking, and me and Greg are both seeking. Because when we record the patents, then and we're going back to some of the Ron Gibson teachings, and so I just need your clarification. So because it's an online land recording office, but we are keeping hard records, just by the way, we would keep hard sealed records as well, so that it would be a publishing and recording, and we will seal them and send them their originals back, and we will keep copies. And we're using the Great Seal. So does that make us a service or a government office?
if you're operating as a land anything, it's an international jurisdiction by definition.
Okay.
So whether you're operating a land recording office for Kansas, or you're operating a land recording office at an international level for the federation,
Mhm.
you're still in international jurisdiction. Okay, so when a recorder from North Carolina makes a record for the North Carolina Assembly, they're simply restricting themselves voluntarily to, working within the confines and working for the LRO of North Carolina.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
uh, if somebody is working for Global Family Bank and they are working for the International Land Recording and Publishing Service,
Mhm.
then they are in the same exact jurisdiction. They're doing the same exact thing. They are creating a record in a different system, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But it's all international.
Yep.
Now, what I worked out with the bank is that when it creates a new record, a new international record, which they're all international, right?
Right.
Of someone who is from North Carolina or Texas or whatever, as a courtesy, they
Mhm.
will send notice to the state assembly that, hey,
Right.
you got a new member here or a new potential member, and here's their name and their address, and you can you can connect with them and invite them to join the assembly.
Yes.
Because remember, not everybody who is an American is going to join their state assembly.
Yep.
They
Yep.
have the freedom of choice. They don't have to join the state assembly.
Yep.
Now, the state assembly should have the opportunity to do outreach to that new person and invite them to join the state assembly.
Yep.
And so that's why the bank shows the courtesy of notifying the LRO and the recorders that, hey, you got a new contact here.
Yep.
Yes.
But unfortunately, in at least two cases where the bank was showing this courtesy and letting them know, okay, this person is declared on North Carolina or this person is declared on Texas or whatever,
Mhm.
the LRO got all up in a big fluff. Oh, they can't do this. They can't record this. Well, of course they can record it. They're an international jurisdiction. They can record any goddamn thing they want. And it's not just your business. It's a courtesy to you that
Yeah.
that they are giving you notice and giving you an opportunity to do outreach to this person and make them aware of the assembly and invite them to be members of your assembly. But they're not the people are not subject to you.
Right.
Right. Isn't that why we left and declared against the king? I mean, hello. So back to our land office that we're putting together. Are we
Right?
a government office or are we a service? Because apparently that's something that has been brought to my attention, and I was like, okay, I thought we were doing this for Anna because Anna asked us to. I don't know, and so I'm
You're
asking.
operating under the auspices of the United States of America. You're operating under the auspices of the Federation and international jurisdiction, just like all of them are.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm just checking because I was like, I thought it was all the same thing. And then, somebody wants to get caught up on this semantic. And look, we know there's semantic deceit. So that's why we come to you with these crazy things because of the
Every,
confusion.
every state assembly that now exists
Mm-hmm.
is operating exclusively
Mm-hmm.
as a state of the union, as a member of the Federation of States.
But our
Everything
but our land recording office, then what we're building for the patent office that we'll call it, um, that is too, right?
right. If it says land, it's international.
Yep.
Yep. I'm just
Well,
Okay.
making
the
it
bank
clean.
is the bank is a good example.
Yeah.
If you didn't do it this way, every state would have to have their own bank,
I know.
Right.
and that makes no sense whatsoever.
No. It would be so crazy, especially
Yeah.
with everything that you're having to deal with right now. But you know
Yeah.
what? That I mean, look, this is these are such big conversations, and me and Greg are
Yeah.
always talking about, like folks try to make it more complicated, but we're in business and we're just like, look, we know how we want to simplify. Isn't that what we always do, Gregory? We're like, we got to make the business simple because otherwise they're trying to like regulate us to damn death, and we're not trying to be regulated. And because we are not trying to be regulated, we want to make everything simple, and we aren't trying to impose extra regulations on other people. So I think that's why we tend to have a different mindset, Anna.
Well, yeah, I think it can be simple. I'm a free man standing on my soil in my
Mm-hmm.
county with my
Yep.
sovereignty. But I want to do business with the county next to me and the state next to me and the country over the ocean.
Right,
So
right.
there's just levels of sovereign standing on my land to doing business internationally, and there's
I mean,
multiple
you
levels.
ordered that machinery from Africa or
Yeah,
whatever, right,
South
Greg?
Africa. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right. And you see, the state is the gateway
yeah,
to, the State of the Union is the gateway to the rest of the world.
yeah.
Got it.
That makes
And
I really
Yes.
appreciate your explanation today. That really helps me a lot, and it
Yes.
makes sense that it's the land jurisdiction at the state level, the soil jurisdiction at the county level, uh, because the land is under everything. It's under the ocean. It's under the soil. It's universal. So
Yep.
that's logical.
yeah,
Logic.
exactly.
Logic.
Exactly. And
Oh,
um, um,
speaking of land and soil and land, Anna, on the certificate of assumed name document that we do for the 928s, then in the last paragraph, it says these provisions and copyrights are in effect from your birth date, ab initio, onward, and the name or names are revenued and permanently domiciled on the land and soil of the United States and upon the soil and land of your birth state on documents that we have. But on the TAFA website, it says the land and soil of the United States and the land and soil of your birth state. So is it wrong, or was that something that was edited at some point, like in the
Hmm.
928
it
paperwork?
sounds like it may have been, but it isn't really wrong. Your birth state is
Mm-hmm.
the soil state, that is the Union state.
I was thinking it was like the two ends of the stick, and it was like the maximum and the minimum, like because you take the whole and
Well,
the universal law of great and small,
just think about it.
macro, micro.
If you look at any of the birth records that are created,
Mm-hmm.
they always have the county.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why when I read it, I thought this must be right. But on the TASA website currently, it has been edited. And then I was thinking about what you said to us about the General Assembly handbook, you had made some edits. And then I thought, oh, maybe this was an editing situation. And so we wanted clarity on that because we were like, this is a very powerful document. And we were having an entire conversation. You could talk about this one document for hours because it's like 928 different incredible things that you guys have put into this one document. You're making the people you're naming them as the banker, and you're moving them from being the dual citizen, Papist municipal and the British territorial, and moving them, reconveying them. It's such
Right.
a powerful doc, and
I,
making them the banker in that same move. And
yeah,
also like the way it's just brilliant, really, this
yeah,
document.
Well, we're reflagging the vessels.
yeah.
Yes, right. And I
I
almost
don't owe
wonder.
my government anything. My government owes me.
Right. I almost wonder, like, with the way that things are going right now, like how relevant this even is anymore. But when you really read it, it makes me cry because it's so powerful. The acknowledgement of the head administrator from the home office of the private banker under UCC 1-201 and 1 I mean, if people look this up and comprehend what this actually says, it's incredible. And you did it in 3 pages?
Well, it was, we had to start reconveying all these businesses,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's why
And
we're looking at it. Me and
yeah, so we
yeah.
had to, we had to reflag and reconvey all these businesses that had been established in our names.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But the actual owner was not actively managing their own business up until this point where they're making a choice about, am I going to operate as a British territorial vessel or am I going to operate as an American state vessel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so this was the new option. This was the ability to reconvey to your state.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, all of this stuff it's very much simplified if you just think in terms of the union state as the nation state
Yeah.
and the state of the union as the international state.
Mm-hmm. So then
So
we can leave this language the way that it is what you're saying also.
yes, because when you as an individual living being are born, uh, the jurisdiction that you're born into is the county jurisdiction,
Right.
and then the county is part of the union state.
Yep.
Right.
And then the union state has what? A state of the union.
Wow.
And I go back to the quilt to try to visualize it. The Union State is the patchwork of counties all connected together, and then the State of the Union is the outline of the state.
Right. And
Yeah.
one is national and one is international.
National. Yep. Yep.
And the international entity which is all of our state assemblies are all states of the nation, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of those states of the nation are the doorway for the county to be able to operate
Yep.
in international jurisdiction without ever really leaving their national jurisdiction.
Yeah.
It's so brilliant. This is so brilliant. The more we get into it, it's just like, this is what I spent my Sunday doing, Anna, because, I'm trying to explain to the business owners how this gives them their private business power to operate. And because you got to know your paperwork,
Right?
And so
and you have to know your country. You have to know your government.
You do.
And your nationality. These young people don't know that there's, so, when I was growing up, I tell you a lot, right, Anna, that, I knew, they were saying, oh, well, are you black or white, Niti? Because I was on North Carolina and I was 7 years old. And I was like, well, I'm Indian. I'm not black or white. They were like, well, you got to pick one. I'm like, no, I don't. I know where I'm from. You don't. You're just black or white because you don't know where you came from.
Yep. Don't know who you are.
Right. You don't know who you are. I said, and I was like, they don't know what ethnicity is. They don't know what nationality is. And then I realized now, that was when I was 7, right? But today I'm looking back at that and I'm like, oh, this doggone education system didn't want anybody to know where they were from or who they are, because then they can't stand. And this is what we try to explain to folks who are dealing with the prison system. Like, you can't be in prison if you have a nationality, because now they are violating their usufructory duty to protect you and cause no harm. And they're harming you because they're cashing in on you, right? Like, isn't this what they're doing?
Yeah. They're mischaracterizing you. They're impersonating you, literally.
Yeah.
And they are then inflicting harm on you under the false pretense that you are the same as their created entity.
Which is another joke, because we can't be the creator and stand under our creation.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So
I have
fraud. It's just plain. That's why I call it the great fraud.
Yeah.
The great fraud. Because they want to put the creator under the creation. I'm sorry, Gregory. I yield to you.
You haven't got to anybody else's questions, and we are an hour, but I do have a 180-degree turn somewhat from what we've just been discussing. I have a banking question, I guess I would title it as. But in the Blood Money series, there's a discussion about where we need to get the ferns out of the system. because of what all has gone on there, the fraud, the printing presses running, halfway around the world, multiple duplicate serial numbers probably floating around out in the world, all the fraud that's been out there. And I recall an area in the blood money where you were discussing we need to get the ferns out of the system for a couple of reasons. One, to get them out of the system, but is also as evidence of the fraud. Now, is the safety vault gateway that's being provided with the GFG, which I'm done. I've exercised that 3 times now. I've brought ferns into the safety vault. They then get converted over to AFD at a 1-for-1 exchange, which is, amazing. but in addition, there's no better deal out there that I'm aware of. But in addition to that, though, are we also pulling ferns out of the system by doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a way to reduce their national debt.
Yeah.
And it's a way of reducing inflation.
Yeah.
And at the same time, guaranteeing and improving upon your buying power.
Yeah. That's why I saw it as this really, a win-win-win type of situation.
Wait, may I?
Yeah.
Okay, so the ferns that you're sending to the vault, this is on a ledger. It's not actually cash.
Correct.
Okay, so then my question is, because, they can just make up whatever they do on the ledger, right, Anna? But then we want to pick up whatever on the street and give it to you. Then do you send those to the treasurer, what's her face, or whoever might be there, I don't know anymore, and say, here,
no.
Okay.
It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with the bank.
Okay.
In 1934, Great Britain defaulted on its war debts from World War I to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
When they did that, that created a crisis because we were, relying upon them paying us back, and suddenly they're not paying us back. So what are we going to do? So then they had the Emergency Banking Act of 1934. And this is when they established their exchange rate between the Federal Reserve note and the US silver dollar at 1-to-1. They just out of the thin air said, okay, well, we're going to exchange our IOUs for your silver money, and we're going to take in all your silver and use that to pay our international debts. And we will owe you an amount equal to the value of that silver dollar. So every FRN doesn't equate to a silver dollar anymore, does it?
No. So that was just lies and bullshit.
Okay, so they basically gave us IOUs in exchange for all our silver. And then they used our silver to pay their international debts so that they could stay afloat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they did it under force and color of law, which was criminal. However, what it did was it established a international base rate that is on paper, and it still stands. So has the value of the FRN gone up or down since 1934?
Down by about 98.9%.
Right. It has lost, and been cut, and inflated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's virtually worthless now, but it's taken almost 100 years, 91 years, whatever, to get to the point of being useless, right?
Mm-hmm.
You, as an American, what have you experienced? You've experienced loss, continuous loss for 91 years. And how is that reflected? How can you come up with a some sort of an equivalency, some way to calculate your loss.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out that you can use it based against gold.
Yep.
And so if you were to calculate the loss over those years that you as an American suffered, it would equivalence out again 1-to-1 with an AFD.
So is that where you came up with the 1 to 10 ratio? So an AFD is 1/10 of an ounce.
So it is
Because
1/10 of an ounce because it says 1/100th and then it says 1/10 and it's confusion. Or
it's
is
one.
it 1/10 for the ferns in the vault versus AFDs that otherwise? Because
No, I think sorry, and I'm not trying to answer
there,
for you. My
there's
comment
a
is that
there's a
it's one.
confusion because it's in writing two different ways. So
But if here's the importance of the exchange, right? The St. Crown Exchange.
And our exchange, which is coming online.
So on the exchange, it's 10 to 1. Whereas if gold's at $3,000 an ounce, it's just shy, right?
Right.
Shift the decimal point one place to the left, and AFD is 300.
Yeah, exactly. There's a 1-to-1 ratio all the way across the board, so that he puts a Federal Reserve note in the vault, right? It
right.
gets reflected as 300
Yep.
on his account, on the gold account. And that's to make it up to him for his
Yep.
losses as an American.
Is there historically a 10 to 1 ratio on gold to silver? It seems like it isn't right now because it's so manipulated.
Right. It's actually about 2/3 to 1.
Okay, all right.
Normally, but for the purposes of this calculation and with the business of how much we've lost through degradation of the fiat currency and the repeated cycles of bankruptcy,
Yeah.
We just said, well, 1-to-1 to 1 to 1 to 1.
Yeah.
And so it's a great opportunity if anybody has money that they're trying to shelter or save, to be able to put it into gold-backed, asset-backed currency, and to get a very favorable exchange rate. And you can only get that if you're an American.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Wait. Okay. Does that mean that when we convert it the other way, the AFD is 1/10, or it's when you convert it the other way, it's 1/100?
No, because it's based on gold.
Yep.
Well,
So
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is an arbitrary way for us to take that exchange rate and return the losses to the Americans who were victimized by it. We're turning the exchange rate in the other direction so that now all of the money that they lost through attrition and inflation and repeated bankruptcy cycles, all the buying power that they lost on their $1934
right
is returned to them.
And it's really even better as we go forward because the fern continues to lose value. It will continue and it'll get exponential here shortly.
Right.
Within their plan.
Within their plan, but at that 1-to-1, what happens is instead of 290 or whatever it is today, it'll be 400, 500. And that's not, gold doesn't change value. Gold is gold, right? The fern is going to be losing that much value that quickly.
Right. And, so for people who are stuck using the Federal Reserve note, this is a gateway. This is a portal where you can leap in with your FRNs and secure gold at a much higher rate than what that FRN is worth.
Yeah, because otherwise, to get 1/10 of an ounce of gold, it would take me 290 ferns. And in this scenario, I get it for one fern.
Right.
Because that's making up for what all it's cost me, my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, all the way back to 1934, and really 1913 probably.
Well, let's put it this way. When we were discussing this at the bank level, we were generous toward the Americans because this was done to them. And they acted in good faith. It was done under color of law. It was gross fraud, and it was strong-armed. Don't forget that at the same time, federal agents under FDR were going around farmhouse to farmhouse collecting wedding rings and gold necklaces and crosses and anything and everything that people had that was gold, and were outlawing the poor peasantry from having gold and stealing it. They were stealing it. And FDR admitted later that he had collected 20,000 tons of gold, privately owned gold. And then he went on and he described how he gave 6,000 tons to the Federal Reserve, and then he used the rest of it to give an asset backing to the World Bank and the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development. And so he stole our gold, our physical gold, and used it to back these banks. And he admitted it on tape.
That's why you'll find gold and silver buried or hidden in old farmhouse walls or buried down in the cellar or whatever. The families were protecting, trying to save their gold and silver, their family heirlooms.
Right. And so this reciprocity that we established at the bank, we went back to the value in 1934 and calculated it out and said, well, but by the time you've gone through all these iterations and all the other debts and stuff that they have accrued because of this, we're going to establish a one-to-one with the AFD. And so Greg here puts in, I'm just going to use 10,000 FRNs. He's getting 10,000 AFD, which is an incredible deal. I mean, 270 for one. Okay. And the reason that he's doing that is to recoup the losses from 1934 to today on the FRN. He's an American. He's owed that.
Yep. Because that family gold that got stolen, had it not got stolen and handed down, would be here now. And it's not. Right.
And the valuation of the dollar would not have been degraded. Okay. Yeah. And that was a slow process, but it hit multiple times over time. Yeah. So, when you're thinking about this, you need to think in terms of loss and opportunity loss over time.
Yeah.
Almost 100 years of loss and opportunity loss. And viewed from that perspective, it is a restitution for that.
Yep.
One of the oddball things that we're dealing with right now is Trump's administration is faced with ending the Internal Revenue Service. Well, one of the things that turns out that people don't know is that money that was collected by the Internal Revenue Service was never used to pay anything. It was never used to pay for services, for example. People think that they give their tax money and that's what pays for, defense. That's what pays for road repair. They think that they're being taxed and they're giving this money back to the government to pay for services, right?
Yeah.
No, that's not how it works. Not at all. What happens is that they use the money that they collect for the Internal Revenue Service as a pressure valve to control inflation. They basically just take all of that money out of circulation and use it as a means to control inflation.
Inject or pull out money either way.
Yeah, they burn it up. They literally incinerate it so that it's no longer in the economy.
Wow.
That's how they've been controlling inflation, is by taxing and withdrawing that much out of the active system.
Yeah.
There's so many things.
Well, but I always try to look at the spin it to the positive side. And the positive side is we eliminate the fiat and we go to real sound money.
Right.
And the opportunity, the golden era, no pun intended, but that creates a huge opportunity because stuff like that no longer can happen.
Exactly.
Right. And, I've also been asked about these bills. There are bills that are printed that have, $1 million, $2 million, whatever. These bills are that's what they used in the old days before computers to transfer large amounts of money between banks. And you never saw them on the street.
Right.
But they were what they would use internally in the bank system to transfer large amounts of money from Citibank to JP Morgan to,
Yeah.
And they're just symbolic. They're perfectly worthless, just as regular FRNs are worthless in actual fact. But, they are legitimate, and there's still bags and bags and bags of them sitting around Treasury.
Wow.
And so you ask, why don't you get rid of those? Why don't you just throw those in the furnace?
Mm-hmm.
and the serial numbers, the whole thing. No, you look at a bill, and every one of them has a serial number.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you would think that they would have maintained some kind of tracking on all of that, but they didn't.
Oh, how convenient.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So here we are. We've got this Mickey Mouse monetary system that's founded on blood money. Yeah. The FRN system is 100% blood money. It's all performance contracts, child labor contracts. This is how foul, how, over the top these guys. And it was all under color of law, so that people thought it was their government doing this and trusted their government. Yeah. And that's, what's even more pathetic. But anyway, they got away with this. And, they were operating in commerce. And what's the law of commerce? Well, the law of commerce is Roman civil law. And the particular brand of commerce that they were operating under was a brand of commerce, maritime commerce, that was tweaked by the Scottish government. Now, nobody ever thinks about Scotland. Scotland, what the? Nobody thinks about Scotland.
Right.
Who knows the laws of Scotland except the Scottish, right? And so they have this maritime law, and literally the apprentice lawyers in Scotland are called devils.
You can't make it up, can you?
No.
Wow.
And so if there's a book called The Devil's Handbook, and it's about Scottish maritime law. And this is the form of law that they adopted and that they've used here in this country without any yes, no, maybe, say you so. They just adopted this in their courts, and then they impressed us. They basically press ganged and conscripted us as volunteers. You've heard
Mhm.
that their system is voluntary, right?
Right.
And then use their supposed contract with us to impose labor contracts on us, and set up this entire bogus system of issuing IOUs based
Yeah.
on our assets and our credit. It's basically a national level identity theft.
Yep.
Just as if you're familiar now. We're familiar in this day and age, although when this all got started, it was not familiar knowledge. You've all experienced credit card theft,
Mhm.
where somebody gets hold of your credit card information and they go charge up stuff in your name, and then you get the bill for it, and you've never heard of this company that's sending you the charge, right?
Yep.
They did this whole same thing. They stole our national identity
Yeah.
back in 1868. Okay, so they owe us a heap a ton of money, boys. And they're also in a situation where their corporation owes it to us, but their principals owe it
Right.
too. Now,
Right.
one of the neat things about Roman civil law, even though it is so twisted and convoluted and allows deceit, Roman civil law says, "Let him who will be deceived."
Yeah.
As long as you're deceived, we won't do anything to help you. If,
Right.
you, if you're
Right.
deceived, that's your lookout. But if you come back and you show the court that you were deceived and show them the nature of the deceit,
Yeah.
then the court blows it all the way back to before it happened.
Fraud has no time limit, right?
Fraud has no statute of limitation, and anything that is tainted by fraud is invalidated.
Yep.
So it blows it all the way back to the very moment that the very first fraud occurred.
Wow.
And where they got off track and where the first fraud occurred was in April of 1861.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So it takes us back over 160 years,
Wow.
and it demands recoupment and restitution for that entire time period.
Wow.
So that's when I say to you that they owe us an insurmountable debt. I'm being very literal about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, when Trump pulls the plug on the IRS, inflation is going to skyrocket. And that's the only reason he doesn't want to pull the plug on the IRS.
Yep.
But he's still being compelled to pull the plug on the IRS because basically, number one, the IRS was always an illegal proposition from day one, because it was a peonage contract in this country against foreign citizenry that was basically forcing them to pay a payroll kickback tax,
Yep.
which is illegal.
Yep.
And so many people are doing it right now, and they are 1,000,000%. All these corporations are doing that and making people believe they can't work as a side effect of that.
But the going back to your point about pulling the plug on the IRS and inflation going through the roof. So that is why this one for one AFD exchange is so important to all the Americans out there listening. Because as soon, like you said, as soon as he pulls the plug, that means people look at it and they think gold goes up in value. It doesn't go up. The fern goes down. The fern goes down. Gold stays right where it's at. The fern goes down, and it's going to go to $10,000, $20,000. Who knows what it's going to go to ferns to buy 1 ounce of gold. Well, take your ferns and get them to gold. That's what AFD is. Do that, and that's how you preserve your wealth and get paid back. Like to your point, and get the payback of the past
Right. I'm not giving you anything that you don't already deserve, that you're not already owed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not a giveaway.
Right.
Right. It's
So,
not.
wow.
Wow. Well, man, this was a good one, Anna. This was
Yes.
a good one. And for anybody out there who is brand new to this and you are just getting started, first of all, I shared, Anna, your PDF for the Devil's Handbook that you have offered on your website for free. And so I've put that into the chat for anybody who wants to download it. So you can get that for free and start looking at it.
Doesn't our term sheriff or whatever also come from Scotland? The sheriff, what we call the sheriff now?
Yeah, well, the Scots have been in this for a long time.
Okay.
Scot-free.
And they've been twisting and turning this in the British Isles for the last 300 years. They've been complicit in the rise of Great Britain and in all of the deceit and all of the fraud that Great Britain has participated in.
Wow.
Yeah, getting off scot-free. Gregory,
Yep.
that's what they're doing.
Yep.
They are participating in a fraud in that they presented Great Britain, the quote unquote union state, as a country when in fact it's a business.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. This is all about business, friends. It's all business. And all they're trying to do is invoice you and bill you and charge you. They're billing you and charging you.
Well, it's a corporation, which is a fictitious entity, right? It's
Right.
made up out of thin air.
Right. Just grab a paper and just start making your bills, guys. Just bill them. Just bill them.
And a country is the land and the soil and the people, and it's real. It's real.
Yes, it's the difference between actual and factual and what's imagined, what is just in your head.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the airy-fairy jurisdiction is fun. It's fun. We get to create.
The land of Oz.
The yellow brick road.
Well, that's all in Kansas, right?
The golden age.
There's this one scene in The Wizard of Oz where at the end, all of the baddies come clamoring in, and Glinda the Good Witch is just standing there and says, "Be gone! You have no jurisdiction here."
I remember that.
Yep.
It's true.
Yep, that's the air.
Anna, do you know if GFG is backlogged on correspondence regarding vault accounts?
No, not that I know of. I do know that they're very, 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 very busy this week because they're about to open their own exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, perfect. That's awesome news.
Okay, so now we will be able to trade in real time with 184 world currencies.
Wow. That is incredible. Well, I know that the St. Crown, is it St. Crown? I think that's starting in October. So is everything kind of starting later, or how's that going?
Our system is completely separate.
Okay.
And I know that's kind of hard for people to, wrap their head around. Mm-hmm. But we can operate, we have both American Admiralty, American Maritime, American Land Jurisdiction. We can operate all of those under our own auspices. And so our system is totally separate from their system.
Yep.
Right. I think a lot of folks just can't get it that we don't open our accounts with St. Crown or anybody, that GFG is our bank and it's talking to a lot of these other banks. And they don't even, can you just real quick, like Anna, with Swift and BRICS, like those are two separate systems. And then this is a separate system. So see, they can all talk to each other.
Well, they can. But remember, there are two different systems. There's the asset-backed currencies, and then there's the fiat currencies.
Mm-hmm.
Two separate systems, two separate things entirely. Over here, you've got gold and silver dollars and certificates of same that relate to actual bullion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over here, you've got commercial paper, you've got stocks, you've got bonds, you've got promissory notes. Are those things of value? Well, of course they're of value, but they're airy-fairy. They're on paper. They're just commercial paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got two forms, two different systems. One is the international trade system over here with gold and silver and petrodollars and things that are based on actual factual commodities. That's on this side. This is
Mm-hmm.
international trade.
Yeah.
And by the way, people say that our money is worthless and blah, blah, blah. The US dollar in international venues has always been asset backed.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
never been anything but asset backed.
Because that's the only way they're allowed to operate, right, Anna?
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
no one knows this. So this is the big confusion also, and like international trade versus commerce.
Which is why he had to look the silver, because he had to pay
right.
that internationally.
Right. They weren't able to do it with their, promissory notes.
Yeah.
Right. So
I mean, sorry, whatever.
okay, so first it was backed by gold.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was backed by silver.
Mhm.
Then it was backed by refined petroleum products.
Right.
Okay. The USD has always been backed by commodity of some kind. Okay. And it has to be to function in international trade.
Even our birth certificate commodity.
That is over here.
Okay.
Now, the gold that backs the birth certificate is in this system. The gold does not translate directly into this system. In this system, you have credit based on land, based on gold, based on petroleum. Okay.
Oh.
And remember what the Federal Reserve actually functions on.
The certificates.
No.
Oh.
Reserve fractional banking.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the fraud over here. This is where they basically kite checks.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
I call it check kiting because what they do. Okay, here's our friend Greg on Canvas, and he just took 10 big bars of gold bullion worth, $30,000, and he put them over here in international trade as an asset. Okay, but say he's doing business with a commercial bank over here. The commercial bank latches on to the 10 big bullion bars and says, congratulations, Greg, you now have credit for that value in our bank based on your real assets. Only they don't stop there. They use their fractional reserve banking system to actually issue 10 times
That's right.
the value of the physical asset. So when he arranges for a deposit of his gold, they're not actually changing systems.
Oh.
What they're doing is they're blocking the use of his asset over in this system so that it can operate in this system. And when they do it, they don't just give him his $30,000 worth of credit. I mean, that's all he sees out of it. He only sees the $30,000 worth of credit registered in this system.
Mm-hmm.
But they actually the bank actually issues 300,000.
Right.
Okay. So for 1/9 or 1/10 rather, he gets 10% and they get 90%.
Yep.
And out of that 90%, they then take that 90% worth of credit that they sponged off of him and his assets, and they loan that out at interest.
Yep. They make money on that free 90%.
Wow.
Yeah, they get the 90% right off the top of the transaction, which is unjust enrichment by
Yep.
anybody's standard.
Right.
And then they loan it out, and they take back all the interest and usury from the loan.
Yeah.
And so even if a few of those loans go bad, they're still sitting pretty because they already siphoned off the value of his credit.
Yep.
But it all belongs to Greg. Okay, this is the point I keep bringing up to people is if you own the asset, you also own all the credit coming off of that asset. So if they were going to play this straight, if they were going to do the right thing by Greg here, the moment that they blocked down his asset in the international trade sector, it would go over here. 300,000 would have appeared on his ledger, and then they would have subtracted a reasonable and customary brokerage fee for making that happen.
Sure.
And so, he would have gotten a lion's share of what his asset was producing as credit.
Right.
Okay.
And look at the inflation that occurred there. We talk about why is the fern no longer worth 98% of what it was in 1934. That right there is why. Because they just inflated or devalued that fern by 90%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're putting $300,000 worth of fiat into the credit into the system based on $30,000 worth of real asset.
Right. And so the bank is basically kiting checks.
Yeah.
They're using your credit to make loans.
Yep.
And then they're betting on the time differential.
Yeah. Nobody will cash it all in at once.
Right. Right. And they're kiting checks. They're literally writing checks
Yep.
on money that isn't theirs.
So
and credit that isn't theirs.
And it's funny, or not funny. I guess that maybe we'll just call it funny. But if we were to have a modern day bank run, people aren't going to get their gold and silver because that's not possible. But even if we had a modern day bank run, people trying to get their physical, the cash, there won't be very much. They'll be empty of cash very, very quickly, because not only are they fractionally reserved on their asset, but they even are fractionally reserved on the IOUs as well, which is what's crazy.
The IOUs are evidence of crime.
Yeah.
So of course they want to get rid of the IOUs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're not going to be able to.
Right. Right.
But, to me, I got my lesson in that when I was just a little tiny girl and I was up in the attic of my grandmother's bedroom. And she had a portfolio of stock certificates. And they were stock certificates in a creamery that had opened in the 1920s.
Okay.
And my grandfather had invested some money in this creamery back in the 1920s. Well, the creamery went bankrupt in 1929, and the stock certificates were worthless because the whole operation went down in flames and was bankrupted.
Right.
So, he and the other investors lost their investment. Now, this is the part about corporations that people don't understand. The advantage of a corporation is that when it goes bankrupt, if it went bankrupt under, honest circumstances, the corporate veil protects the investors from the debts of the corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So that shareholders and owners, investors in the corporation, they don't lose their private fortunes. All that they lose is their investment.
Yeah, they don't go negative.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, but you do lose your investment.
Right.
And this is the other part that people need to understand is the corporate veil just goes so far. The corporate veil protects your personal fortune, but it does not protect your investment in a corporation.
Right. Right.
Okay. So people are investing in all these corporations in the stock market.
Right.
And they're not thinking.
Right.
They're not thinking in terms of their investment being lost.
Yeah.
Okay. And they need to think about this in terms of their investment being lost.
Yeah.
So,
well,
when you have an overvalued stock market and you're paying more for the stock than you should in the first place,
right.
The corporation has no reason in this world not to go bankrupt.
Right.
And once a few of those big corporations start going bankrupt, then everybody in the stock market is going to want to sell out their shares. And what is that going to do? The whole thing goes like a house of cards.
Yep.
And you don't have any stock market there.
And people have been conditioned to chase yield, invest in equities because you get a 10% gain or whatever year in and year out. So they put everything into it.
Right. And they can lose everything.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is they put these things, they put money in these, what are they called? Where they take and they bundle mortgages together.
Oh, yeah. Mortgage-backed securities. Yeah.
Well, there are mortgage-backed securities, and then there are all sorts of other kinds of bundled securities. Like all of the court cases are all bundled. Right. All these different things are bundled. But what that really means is that nobody knows what part of what they owe. People don't understand fungibility.
Right.
And so, somebody's standing here and they say, well, I have this mortgage-backed security. It doesn't connect to any particular house anywhere on earth.
No.
So,
but then, and the mortgages are unlawful too. So to boot.
Right.
So, I mean, the whole thing is a scam. I mean,
when they started securitizing everything, basically, I don't know when that started many years ago, but it really got amped up in the 80s, I believe, when they really started to securitize everything, like mortgages.
Right.
You mean scam more lawfully?
Oh, yeah,
It's like the insurance, the legalized gambling. What's the different about any of this? It's all the same.
It's all fraud in one
Right.
respect or another.
But you have to hand it to them, though, as you were talking about the Scots and all this stuff. They did recognize the more complex you make something, like 80 million pages of code, the more people will believe it. And
right. That's why they have trouble, Anna, with any of the things that you say, because it's simple. It's so simple. Yeah. That's not real. That's not true.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's so simple. But the truth is simple. That's what we keep saying.
The truth is always simple. It's the lies that are complex.
The truth is stranger than fiction is what I've always heard.
That too. Hey, I think on that note, we can close the show because that's a good one. That's a good one. And you guys, we will be back here next week. Thank you for joining us on this new time. And I hope this has worked better for you, Anna, so that we're meeting. Uh-oh.
Well, I'm still battling my cold, but I got a good night's sleep.
Good.
And I wasn't up too early. relative
Good.
to, the schedule I have to keep for international phone calls.
Yes.
So that made a big difference. And thank you guys very much for shifting to a later date, a later time
Absolutely.
slot.
I like it.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, we will see you next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and at noon AKST.